Hello, my name is Nathan Kline, and I'm the Outreach Coordinator for the Green Party of Kansas City, Missouri. And I'm presenting this month's Green Spotlight topic. It's ecological wisdom, which is one of the Green Party's 10 key values. Part one, our relationship with nature. One of the first conditions of happiness is that the link between man and nature shall not be broken. Leo Tolstoy. Ecological wisdom involves two key concepts: ecology and environmental stewardship. The Green Party describes this key value as human societies must function with the understanding that we are part of nature, not separated from nature. We must maintain an ecological balance and live within the ecological and resource limits of our communities and our planet. Let us take a moment to appreciate how amazing and special life on Earth is. We live on spaceship Earth. Our planet is perfectly situated with the sun in the Goldilocks zone, which makes liquid surface water possible. This water planet has just the right elements: rotation, geology, magnetic field, and atmosphere combined with hundreds of millions of years to create life on Earth. It is important to understand that significant human impact on the environment did not occur until very recently. The Earth has existed for 4.5 billion years. Humans have only been here for about 300,000 of the last years. And the Industrial Revolution only began 250 years ago, approximately, and that's the period in which we've had significant human impact on the planet. Earth is our home, and it is special. Food webs, ecosystems, symbiotic relationships, the decomposition of organic matter into the soil, all of these many examples illuminate the interconnectedness of life on our planet. We do not inherit the Earth, we borrow it from our children and grandchildren. We are but short-term renters, and we need to respect and take care of our home. However, we must face the reality that our relationship with nature is not healthy. In fact, quite frankly, human beings have an abusive relationship with the natural world. We are destroying the land, we are polluting the air and water, we are eradicating our fellow earthlings. We have given ourselves the illusion that we are above and separate from the natural world, which is a psychotic and omnicidal delusion. There are many ways that human civilization has become a full-on assault on the environment. At this point, we have blown way past the carrying capacity of the Earth due to our current model of endless economic growth, which has led to the climate emergency. The climate emergency is caused by humans. It is impacting us now. It is leading to mass extinction. It is historically unprecedented, and it is irreversible. It will take hundreds of millions of years for Earth to repair the life that we have harmed. Part two, the science on climate change. So how do we know these things about the climate emergency? There is a scientific body of the UN that assesses the research on climate change and prepares reports and recommendations for our world leaders who have met annually since 1995 in Conference of Parties, or COP meetings, to coordinate the international response to the climate emergency. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, represents the consensus of the global scientific community that is made up of thousands of PhDs and other experts across dozens of scientific fields collaborating for decades on this research. This is the largest scientific undertaking in human history. Although the process of the IPCC research is very rigorous, it is also, like all good science, productive of conservative results. Scientific consensus has thus far significantly underestimated the speed of climate change. This chart shows the IPCC predictions for Arctic ice extent compared to actual observations. The gray area represents the range of predictions of the scientists for shrinking Arctic ice, with the black line representing their median prediction. The red line, on the other hand, is what is actually happening to the sea ice as it collapses much faster than predicted. This is just one example of the many underestimated predictions of this conservative scientific community. Other climate variables that follow this same pattern include CO2 in the atmosphere, the rate of global heating, the severity and frequency of extreme weather, and many others. The point is, the IPCC has consistently underestimated how quickly the climate crisis is unfolding. At this point, we are on track for what scientists call the hothouse Earth scenario, a scenario in which human activity causes a higher global temperature average than at any time during the past 1.2 million years, due to a breakdown in the feedback loops that regulate the planet's temperature. Once runaway warming begins, it cannot be stopped, even if human emissions cease. Earth is currently 2 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the pre-industrial average. On the left, you see a thermometer. We see there the average global temperature of the Earth at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution marked as 0. On the right, we see scientists estimated global tipping point for runaway climate change, which they estimate to be 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the pre-industrial average. This is the point of no return for humanity. Feedback loops slow up or slow down, speed up or slow down climate change. They can become mutually reinforcing, eventually self-sustaining. Here we see the positive feedback loop for rainforest die-off. As temperatures rise, droughts and fires increase in the Amazon and all forests throughout the world. More trees die, decompose, and burn, releasing the CO2, which increases temperatures. It causes fewer rainforest trees, meaning less water is pumped into the atmosphere. Rainfall decreases, which increases the temperature, and this is a cycle that is killing all the forests on the planet. As you can see, this is how a feedback loop works. Another example of a positive feedback loop is the albedo effect. Parts of the Earth covered with snow and ice are white. White is very reflective of sunlight. As our CO2 emissions heat up the atmosphere, the ice starts to melt, exposing the dark underlying Earth and sea, which absorb most of the heat of the sun. This in turn heats the Earth more, causing more ice to melt, and the cycle repeats. This feedback loop alone has an estimated warming effect equal to 25% of the total human emissions to date. Very powerful. Permafrost melt is another very worrying climate feedback loop. Permafrost is a thick subsurface layer of soil and other organic matter that remains frozen throughout the year, often for thousands of years in the Arctic areas. With warming temperatures, the permafrost releases global greenhouse gases as it melts. Twice as much carbon is stored in the permafrost layer than what exists in the atmosphere. The Arctic is warming faster than any other area on the Earth, and we've already lost 45% of sea ice. Melting permafrost will emit dangerous greenhouse gases, already is, into the atmosphere, causing further warming. Most worrying, it is releasing methane. Methane is 84 times more potent at trapping heat than CO2 over 20 years in the atmosphere. Natalia Shakova, research professor in Alaska, says a 50 billion ton burp of methane from thawing Arctic permafrost is highly possible at any time. The permafrost melt is a ticking time bomb. The methane burp by itself is an immediate 0.9 degrees Fahrenheit increase in global temperature. In the video above, you can see what the kids up north do for fun these days with the methane that is releasing from the melting permafrost. One guy pokes a hole into a frozen lake, and his buddy ignites the methane that shoots out. You can watch dozens of these videos on YouTube from throughout the Arctic. Other major positive feedback loops like this releasing naturally sequestered carbon involve our oceans, our wetlands, and our grasslands. Climate change is not a simple matter of cause and effect. It's more like a vicious cycle. There are numerous climate feedback loops. The ones on the map in yellow have already tipped into out-of-control feedback loops. The ones in orange and red have already started, but have not yet passed the tipping points. At a certain point, these feedback loops exhibit exponential rates of change, in which the rate of change of the past will not be the rate of change of the future. So at this point, it is important to explain the difference between linear change and exponential change. Linear change is how we normally experience change in our daily lives, one step at a time. With exponential change, things change in multiples. For example, if a bacteria at the bottom of a test tube duplicates itself once every day, and it takes 364 days, 1 day short of a year, to fill the test tube halfway. It will only take 1 more day to completely fill that test tube with bacteria. This is exponential change, and this is the type of change that our Earth is experiencing now. Unfortunately, there are other worrying phenomena beyond these feedback loops. Another factor to consider is that of carbon inertia, in which CO2 in the atmosphere takes at least 10 years to have a full impact. 22% of fossil fuel emissions occurred within that last decade. And global emissions are still going up every year. Even during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, in which our economy shut down for months, the US still exceeded its global emissions from the previous year. Even if we were to stop burning fossil fuels today, temperatures are projected to rise at an accelerated pace for at least 13 more years due to the delayed heating effect from what has already been released. This graph shows the spike in our CO2 emissions since the Industrial Revolution. In the first 267 years of this period, humans emitted 442 billion metric tons of CO2. However, in just the 9 years from 2009 to 2018, we emitted 96 billion metric tons of CO2. This is a trend with catastrophic consequences. Then there is the aerosol effect. When fossil fuels are burned, they release particles in the atmosphere that form a protective barrier around the Earth that actually keep it cooler temporarily. Scientists estimate that this aerosol effect is cooling the Earth by 0.9 degrees to 2 degrees Fahrenheit. When we stop burning fossil fuels, there will be a big heat increase. These particles in the atmosphere have a very temporary cooling effect that is constantly being replenished by the burning of more fossil fuels. When this stops, all of that particulate will fall out of the sky, causing an immediate and permanent heating effect. Whether we stop burning fossil fuels now or later, we will stop burning fossil fuels at some point. And at that point, this sudden heating will occur. This is inevitable. So how do all of these different global heating processes add up? At this point, it looks pretty bleak. We know that runaway climate change reaches a catastrophic tipping point at around 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial levels. We've already passed 2 degrees Fahrenheit of warming due to the last 100 years of emissions. We also know that there will be an inevitable heat increase of at least 0.9 degrees Fahrenheit from the loss of the aerosol effect when we stop burning fossil fuels. In addition, the last 10 years of emissions that haven't impacted the environment yet will add at least another 0.36 degrees Fahrenheit of warming. This already brings us to the brink of runaway climate change. Unfortunately, the heating effects from the natural feedback loops that we've talked about and others, and all future emissions have not been included in this calculation, and we know that those will be far beyond zero. In other words, we are very close to the global tipping point, and we've almost certainly already blown right past it. This chart shows the portion of the planet's history when there was life on Earth, about 600 million years, and the relationship of spikes in global CO2 levels with extinction events. 4 out of the last 5 major extinction events on the Earth were caused by spikes in CO2 levels. The last time there was our current level of CO2 in the atmosphere, there were jungles in the Arctic, and much of the rest of the world was uninhabitable due to extreme heat. This is where we are already headed. The 6th mass extinction currently underway is called the Anthropocene extinction because it is the direct result of human activity. We are now adding 100 parts per million of CO2 in 40 years. During the most recent period of abrupt climate change in the past, that increase of 100 parts per million of CO2 took 1 million years to happen. This shows that the current rate of CO2 emissions significantly exceeds any previous period of mass extinction. Part 3, grief and loss. We need to take a moment to acknowledge the gravity of this information. Climate change is an unprecedented loss for which we are all grieving. Much has been lost already from human-induced climate change, and there is still much, much more to lose. There is much that cannot be saved at this point. This is heavy information to take in. It is important to acknowledge that the appropriate emotional response is grief. It is fear. It is shock. It is mourning. It is anger. The final stage of grief is acceptance. We must recognize, process it, and act now. The impacts will be more or less devastating depending on the actions we take now. But at this point, devastation is not just a certainty of the future, it is our current reality. Again, the 6th mass extinction is not something off in the future. It is happening now. Already, there's been a 50% die-off of the coral reefs. Animal populations have collapsed 70% since 1970. And by 1970, 1/3 of all plants and animals are expected to be extinct. 96% of the total weight of all mammals currently alive on the planet are humans and our livestock. 91% of deforestation is due to the global livestock industry. And at current deforestation rates, global forests will be completely gone by 2100. As ecosystems are destroyed, exposure to wild pathogens increases. Waterborne and insect-transmitted diseases like malaria will also increase. Heat stroke, dehydration, malnutrition rates rise with global temperatures. Both Ebola and COVID-19 had long existed in remote, isolated habitats, not previously disturbed much by humans. As humans continue to destroy those habitats, we expose ourselves to these new pathogens. Smoke, smog, and other particulate continue to decrease air quality. 92% live where the World Health Organization guideline limits for air quality are exceeded already. Oceans are also losing oxygen, which is killing sea life. There were 45 ocean sites suffering from low oxygen in the 1960s. Today, there are roughly 700. Marine phytoplankton, microscopic sea life, contributes between 50 to 85% of the oxygen in Earth's atmosphere. But we know that they will stop producing oxygen at 10.8 degrees Fahrenheit above warming above pre-industrial levels. The World Bank is predicting 8 feet of sea level rise by 2040. And 40% of humans live near coastlines, 70% near a significant water source. This will cause mass displacement because of flooding. Hundreds of the world's largest cities are at sea level and will cease to exist by the end of this century due to sea level rise. Indonesia just moved its capital, Jakarta, to a city on higher ground, effectively abandoning one of the largest cities in the world to the sea. Many freshwater sources will be contaminated or wiped out. There are already nearly 1 billion people without access to clean water, and the global crisis will only get much worse. Warming temperatures are causing more flooding and more drought. The frequency and severity of storms, hurricanes, and wildfires are increasing quickly. Much of the Earth will soon be too hot for us to survive. Flooding, drought, and severe weather will devastate agriculture. Warmer temperatures will increase pest insect populations, and by 2040, crop yields will drop by 60%. So says the World Bank, not an ecological activist organization. This will lead to mass starvation in this century. As this all occurs, large swaths of the planet become uninhabitable. Mass migration will explode. By 2050, there's expected to be at least 1 billion climate refugees. Global conflict and war in this environment will increase exponentially. Under these circumstances, social order quickly collapses into chaos. In a destabilized world, the potential for the use of nuclear weapons rises. But maybe more worrying are the 440 nuclear power plants around the globe currently operating. Nuclear reactors are very high maintenance. They require constant, massive input of resources to keep them from melting down and are releasing deadly amounts of radiation over wide areas. The disasters at Fukushima and Chernobyl, although terrible, would have been much worse without massive coordinated responses that prevented the total meltdown of those reactors. In the chaos of the future, the required maintenance and upkeep of these reactors is unsustainable, and each will fail at some point, leading to 440 uncontained nuclear disasters. Part 4, Do or Die. The plane of human civilization is crashing. Now is the time to try to land it in a way that we might survive. Human-induced climate change is by far the most important event in human history, and this decade is the fulcrum point. We are now going through the most rapid period of change in human history. This is the do or die moment for humanity. Nothing else matters after extinction. The cockroaches won't care about the cultural accomplishments of our species, our art, our philosophies, our technology, our great engineering feats. Without future generations to marvel back at what we've done and carry on the human experiment, all of humanity becomes dust. Are we going to party on this plane until it hits the mountain? Or are we going to do everything we can to bring the plane down as softly as possible? Who is causing this problem? The diagram above breaks down global CO2 emissions by country. The problem of CO2 emissions is not evenly distributed amongst nations. However, this pie chart is misleading because much of China's emissions, the blue part, are a result of exports to the US for our consumption. So the US is responsible for much of the blue part there. More importantly, this chart shows that about 175 nations of the world contribute only 21% of the problem. Most nations are living sustainably on this planet. We only have a handful of very bad actors, with the US at the top of that short list. The climate change is the ultimate injustice. The Earthlings who are least responsible for this problem are the ones suffering currently and will suffer the worst effects of this crisis. We have a moral responsibility to act for future generations and all of the other Earthlings who cannot speak for themselves at this critical juncture. This is not news, though. The scientists have been warning us about this for decades. And even the corporations profiting from the burning of fossil fuels have known about this all along. Back in 1957, ExxonMobil scientists noted that the burning fossil fuels was significantly increasing CO2 in the atmosphere and that this was harming the planet. These internal reports continue to disclose the horrific effects of burning fossil fuels and predicted the unfolding events that we are now experiencing. Exxon and the other fossil fuel companies hushed up these findings and spent billions of dollars lying to the public for decades, trying to hide this truth. This is one of the greatest crimes in human history. At COP21, the European Union and 195 countries signed the Paris Climate Accord in 2015. They supposedly committed to keeping global warming below that 3.26 degrees Fahrenheit tipping point and preferably below 2.7 to avoid the worst effects of global climate warming. As you can see from this map, this is a cruel joke of a response to the climate emergency. The Paris Climate Accord has each country set its own emissions target, and there is no enforcement mechanism. Few countries are even close to meeting their pledges, as you can see here, and many are emitting more CO2 than ever, every year. The UN itself admitted that even if all pledges are met, and almost none are even close, the Earth will still be 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit warmer by the end of this century. That's way over the 3.26 tipping point. The capitalists who spent decades lying to us are now trying to sell us solutions to the problems they have caused. Their market-based solutions include insufficient ideas like incentives for corporations not to kill us, like carbon taxes, carbon swaps, clean coal, natural gas as a bridge fuel, expanding dangerous nuclear energy, missions to Mars, and using biofuels, which is just burning trees to power our civilization. They can only consider that which makes them the most profit in the short term. They are locked in a golden cage. We have outlawed such global criminal corporate behavior before. Examples include the banning of CFCs as refrigerants and lead as fuel additives. We must again outlaw this immoral capitalist behavior like we outlawed it with slavery on a finite. The capitalist model of endless economic growth on a finite planet is suicide in a closed ecosphere. It doesn't matter if we love capitalism or we hate capitalism, or if we hate capitalism like I do. Capitalism has run its course. Why are the governments not responding to the climate emergency? Our governments and their leaders are paid servants of the capitalists and are locked with them in their golden cage, trying to lobby, to influence, to protest them, to ask them to change. These sellouts have and will continue to fail. They have proven that they will not do the right thing. Our leaders have failed us. We need to take away the keys from them before they drive us off the cliff. Incremental solutions to catastrophic problems are suicide. Part 5, the green imperative. Small incremental changes are not up to the challenges we face and will not save us. Only the Green Party will provide the large-scale systems change we need to survive. For competent governance, we must have a political party that will not take money from the fossil fuel industry or any other. These are revolutionary times. In revolutionary times, ideas that seem impossible one day become inevitable the next. We must have a World War II style universal mobilization to rapidly transform society into one that can survive on this planet. And we can do it. The Green Party is a very different kind of political party because we are the only party that refuses to take corporate money. We are outside of that golden cage and can therefore serve the will of the people instead of the wealthy few. The Green Party is also an international movement with federations in over 85 countries around the world. We all share the same 4 pillars of grassroots democracy, social justice, nonviolence, and ecological wisdom. We are a grassroots organization supported through dedicated volunteers and the practice of participatory democracy. We are the only truly leftist party in the United States, and our eco-socialist platform blazes the trail towards a just and sustainable world. The Green Party's politics are transformative and up to the challenges facing humanity. We have long rang the alarm bells about the climate emergency, and we've been right all along. The Green Party understands that we need to eliminate economic desperation first, so that we can shift our focus from paying this week's bills to saving life on Earth and leaving a habitable world for our children. We also acknowledge that environmental justice is not possible without economic justice, and that without environmental justice, economic justice quickly becomes irrelevant. Humanity is headed into unprecedented territory. We already know many of the things that we must do to give ourselves the best chance of navigating human society successfully through the difficulties ahead. But we don't yet have all of the solutions to this unprecedented catastrophe. We must innovate as we face the climate emergency head on and together. Only the Green Party will govern with the ecological wisdom necessary to bring us back into harmony with the Earth. We do not have another 10 years or even 5 to wait for climate action. We must repair our relationship with the Earth immediately. The future of our species depends on it. If we fail, there will be nothing our children can do to change the circumstances that we have left for them. It will be too late. We must act now with foresight and courage. This concludes our presentation on ecological wisdom. Join our fight to put people, planet, and peace over profit. Green Party, thank you.